Every supply chain audit report eventually highlights the exact same operational bottleneck, a massive, persistent queue of pending requisitions and purchase orders. Auditors routinely attribute this backlog to vague, boilerplate root causes. They cite a simple lack of periodic review or blame end-user negligence. Faced with these findings, management typically executes the standard reactionary playbook. They perform a massive, system-wide bulk deletion to clear the pending items. This superficial cleanse is then packaged and presented to executive leadership as a metric of success and tangible process improvement. But this is a superficial fix. Deleting records ignores the actual mechanics governing the procure-to-pay lifecycle. Managing a backlog without diagnosing why those records were generated in the first place creates a strict illusion of control. It guarantees the exact same queue will return by the next audit cycle. Concluding that an open requisition is caused by an absence of monitoring is a complete analytical failure. A lack of oversight is a missing first-line defense, like a sleeping security guard. It is not the fractured gear causing the systemic failure. To locate the actual breakdown, auditors must apply a rigorous framework. You have to isolate the specific mechanical blocker that halted the transaction. The procure-to-pay lifecycle requires active, complex stages. Buyers must issue requests for proposals, shortlist vendors, and negotiate final terms. Because procurement involves multiple interdependent variables, it cannot be treated as a binary switch that a user simply forgot to flip. Finding true root causes requires investigating the mechanical failure points at each specific lifecycle stage, rather than blindly critiquing the oversight of the resulting queue. Let us examine the initial requisition phase within a digital enterprise resource planning environment. This diagram shows how digital requisitions are designed to move from creation toward the critical sourcing phase, where they are currently stalling and piling up. The first systemic blocker is often found in outdated material requirements planning configurations. Misconfigured material planning algorithms generate massive waves of phantom demand, instantly clogging the system with invalid requisitions that buyers cannot process. The second technical blocker is the sudden implementation of mid-cycle budget freezes. A frozen budget acts as a hard stop in the system logic. It instantly halts the approval chain, trapping perfectly valid requisitions in a perpetual pending state. The third blocker occurs when end users draft wildly unrealistic technical specifications. Sourcing teams cannot secure vendor quotes, leading to indefinite stagnation. These are severe technical and procedural failures, causing systemic lockups. No amount of basic periodic review from management will ever resolve them. Beyond system failures, the workflow is frequently derailed by human behavioral overrides. A common scenario occurs when an end user realizes they no longer need an item and withdraws the requirement in an offline conversation with the buyer. This flowchart isolates the critical failure point. The user never logs back into the ERP to formally cancel the requisition, leaving an active ghost record frozen in the system loop. When offline human behavior diverges from the prescribed digital architecture, the enterprise software inevitably becomes a graveyard of ghost demand. The same logic applies directly to open purchase orders that sit completely stagnant in the system for months or years. Moving into the fulfillment stage, the primary friction point becomes the complexity of direct vendor interaction and real-world logistics. Inaccuracies or a simple lack of clarity in the initial drafting of the purchase order create immediate vendor hesitation and halt deliveries. If materials are delivered but fail inspection, ongoing unresolved quality disputes at the loading dock will freeze the subsequent invoicing and payment stages indefinitely. An aging open purchase order is almost always a symptom of active commercial friction. Routine recommendations to simply follow up are entirely inadequate. The most common point of failure in closing a purchase order is a direct system mapping disconnect. Consider the standard scenario depicted in this timeline. The physical materials are successfully delivered to the facility, but a severed break occurs right before payment. The receiving team processes a physical goods receipt note manually on paper, completely outside the software interface. Failing to digitally map that receipt back to the original purchase order leaves the transaction perpetually open, awaiting a delivery that already occurred. A similar mapping failure happens when a buyer makes a phone call to immediately halt a delivery, but fails to cancel the corresponding purchase order in the system.
This leaves the digital environment running completely blind to the offline cancellation reality. Whenever physical fulfillment or manual paperwork outpaces digital logging, the enterprise system inevitably loses its structural integrity. Auditing a backlog ignores the underlying system failures that generate it, ensuring those operational breakdowns persist indefinitely. The non-negotiable mandate for modern supply chain auditors is to stop auditing the backlog and start auditing the entire procurement process. True value is generated only when auditors locate the exact operational bottleneck and repair the broken links in the lifecycle. This means prioritizing fundamental system configurations, like repairing erroneous material planning runs to halt the generation of phantom demand. It also requires enforcing strict behavioral controls, forcing all offline, informal communication to align strictly with the rigid workflow of the enterprise system. This shift from passive review to active process engineering converts a redundant audit into a blueprint for structural repair. It is time to abandon the illusion of control, adopt a systems-based methodology, and permanently align your digital architecture with operational reality.